Hey y'all, my name is Susan Sparks and I'm the senior pastor here at Madison Avenue Baptist Church in New York City. We are a diverse community brought together by faith. We hope that you enjoy our service today. The title of my sermon this morning is Watered Down Prayers. So today we are actually beginning a 3-sermon series on prayer. And this Sunday, today, we are going to talk about the discipline it takes to establish a prayer practice. And the next week we're going to talk about how we actually pray. And then this third Sunday we're going to talk about the power of prayer. Today we're going to start with establishing a practice of prayer. And this particular sermon was inspired by a number of things this week, but most importantly, a close call with Pink Jesus. Now, for those of you who don't know about Pink Jesus, as I mentioned, I was down in Charlotte, and I had a comedy show down there. I am also a stand-up comedian. Don't all run for the door at once. It's okay. It's safe. Don't worry about it. But I was doing a comedy show, and as part of that, I have a little pink statue of Jesus about this tall. He's plastic, and he has an 8-ball in his feet, and he answers questions. Maybe not the most appropriate thing for a pulpit, but a comedy show, all bets are off. Okay, so anyway, I brought Pink Jesus, and the problem is I forgot to check a bag, which means Pink Jesus is going through TSA. Not a good idea. So I'm standing there, and here comes my bag through TSA, and of course, it stops, right? And I could see this guy looking, and all of a sudden he goes, I need a supervisor. Supervisor comes over, another person comes. Finally, there's like 4 people looking at the screen. And I'm like, are you looking at the pink plastic Jesus? Because it's fine. It's not scary. It's perfectly fine. And the supervisor looked and then looked at me, and he kind of reared back and he said, I need to see Jesus. To which I responded, don't we all? And so they opened the bag and they saw Jesus, and they all were gathered around looking. And, at some point I said, why don't you just ask him? Like, he's right there, And so they had a long conversation. It appeared amongst themselves, and I'm glad they didn't turn him over because some of his answers are a little spicy. But the bottom line is they finally decided Jesus was okay, and I got him back. Thank you. The power of seeing Jesus, it just can transform you. So this week, in that particular moment, I know while the TSA's agent statement, I need to see Jesus, was kind of limited to the context in that moment, it reminded me of really a larger issue of our yearnings for God, of our need to connect with something larger, of our need to reconnect to that from which we came. We just need to see Jesus every once in a while. And so today our sermon is all about how to try to make prayer a holy habit in our lives. Now, this week, in this particular sermon, we begin by tackling a pretty basic question. How do you build a prayer life? Or maybe a more specific question, do you pray? Now, that sounds like such a basic question. You ask somebody and they're like, yeah, duh, of course I pray. I go to church, I pray. But I think it's more complicated than that. I actually did a little experiment this week and asked some folks, when was the last time they stopped to pray? And their answers were, they were kind of watered down. When was the last time you prayed? Question. Answer, church. When was the last time you prayed? Answer, my aunt was sick and I prayed for her. When was the last time you prayed? They were downsizing my office, and so I was worried about my job. I mean, all legitimate prayers, but all prayers for a reason. And this is not the kind of prayer I'm talking about. I'm not talking about kind of watered down prayers, praying because you're supposed to, praying because you're supposed to, like in church, or praying because you need to, or you need something, like you're worrying about your job. Those are fine, but I'm talking about something bigger. It's like the old saying, if you only pray when you're in trouble, you're in trouble. Now, don't get me wrong. Again, prayer at any time is a good thing, but if you don't continue that conversation, if you don't use that particular prayer and continue it as a consistent prayer, then the whole power of prayer is gutted. I mean, think about it like this. Our relationship with God is built in a very similar way to our human relationships. The only way you build intimacy with someone is by working at it. You spend time with them. You listen. You share. You laugh. You cry. You build trust. I mean, if we relegate communication in our human relationships to 3 minutes a week of carefully chosen words like we do in church, that relationship is going nowhere. It's almost like we treat God like a Facebook friend. I mean, think about this. Facebook friends aren't really friends, I don't know about you, but in my life I have 2, 3 really close friends, folks that I've known for a while, that I've worked that relationship, that care about me, that I care about them, that I follow, that I visit with, that I see. On the flip side of that, I have 4,987 Facebook friends. 4,985 of whom I don't know. I've never met. I've never talked to them in person. Nevertheless, I call them friends. And it's kind of the same with God. You know, we call God a friend, yet we never talk to God. We never spend time with God. Do we really know God? And we say we're religious. Oh, we're religious. We worship God. But do we consistently pray? Building a prayer life is just building a relationship. You've got to show up. You've got to work at it. You have to prioritize it. You have to schedule it. You actually have to get to know each other. Kind of like our TSA supervisor who said, I need to see Jesus. Yet, prayer's not really a priority in our lives. Do me a favor. I've never usually encouraged people to pull out their smartphones, but if you have a smartphone, pull it out. Just pull it out. And everybody's like, wow, that's cool. Don't look at your email. Don't go down that rabbit hole. But pull out your phone and look at your calendar for next week. Look at it. Look at all the lunches and the dinners and the coffees and the meetings and the errands you have scheduled. Right? Where is God in that schedule? I'm sorry? Where? I couldn't hear you. Beer and Bible. Okay. Well, honestly, check. That's great. So we got one engagement with God, which circles back to Madison and to Joe. Right on. It's all good. Anything else? I mean, maybe you do have God scheduled in outside of beer and Bible. Thank you, Joe, again. A really, really great comeback. But where is it? You know, where's the priority? Where's the quiet time? Where's the time, the dedication that's equal to the time we put in all the other earthly things that we do? You know, I had the great opportunity to travel fairly extensively before seminary, and during that time I visited several predominantly Muslim countries, and I must say I learned more about prayer in those countries than I did in a lifetime of church. I'm going to say that. Spent time in Cairo, for example, and in this urban, humming, bustling city, 5 times a day, every day, a prayer call would ring out, and everyone would stop. Business people, merchants, students, families, children, they would stop and pray. And if they weren't near a mosque, they would stop where they are and they would pray. As a matter of fact, there's a guy right here on 31st and Madison that has a coffee truck. I went out there recently to get coffee, prayer call. He was on his rug on 31st praying by the coffee cart in Midtown. Our Muslim brothers and sisters, for them, prayer is a foundational structure for their daily lives. It's like breathing in and out for them. It's not a matter of convenience. It's their very connection to the holy. It's a matter of survival. So how do we find that kind of dedication as Christians? How do we discipline ourselves to consistently include prayer in a meaningful way? How do we make it a point of survival, not convenience? I think we need to find something integral to our daily lives that can link us back to prayer. Something that is so elemental, so basic to the holy that every time we experience it, we think of God. And that's where our scripture comes in today that Shakia read so beautifully for us. In the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth was a formless void and darkness covered the face of the deep, while a wind from God swept over the face of the waters. In the beginning, when there was nothing but a formless void, a wind from God swept over the face of the waters, which means the waters started it all. When you read Genesis 1, you realize water is the basic element of all creation. It all started there. From there, God then created light. From there, God then pulled the dome of the sky from the waters. God separated the waters and land appears. And then all of a sudden, creatures and vegetation and human beings. It all begins with the water. 65% of the human body is water. 72% of the earth's surface is water. It's the source of all life. It's not only the source of all life, but it's what connects us to the holy. I mean, almost every major world religious tradition, as well as indigenous traditions, use rituals involving water for purification, for renewal, for connection to the holy. I mean, in just a few minutes, we're going to have this beautiful baptism service for Sam and for Jesse, where they will submerge in the water, in that elemental base of all creation, and through the Spirit of God, moving over and in those waters, they will come out transformed and renewed. So if water is the source of all life and it connects us to the holy, why not make that our anchor for prayer? What if every time we just drank a glass of water, or took a shower, or washed dishes, or stepped over a puddle, or walked in the rain, or looked down 34th Street to the Hudson or the East River, we thought of God? And in that moment of thinking of God, a prayer organically forms. It doesn't even really matter what you pray. What's important is that we consciously turn our attention to God over and over, day after day. And when we do this, wonderful things begin to happen. After a few weeks, we may find that a prayer habit is forming in our life. In fact, we may not need an anchor anymore after a bit of time to remind us of God. It will just start to happen organically. We begin to feel a need for prayer like we feel a thirst for water. Gandhi said, prayer is not asking, it is longing. And we will begin to feel that longing, a need to connect with something larger, a need to see Jesus. Ultimately, as we continue that daily practice, our hearts and minds, our actions and our lives, they will change. So I say, let's start this morning. Let's start together this morning. For as Jesse and Sam wade into the waters of baptism, I invite all of us to wade into commitment to prayer, to dedicate the next 3 weeks to a new version of watered down prayers, not the one-shot prayers where we beg for God to do something and then don't talk to God for days or weeks, but ongoing daily prayers that include God in all aspects of our lives, including water. Water's not a matter of convenience for us, it's a matter of survival, and that should be our goal for prayer, to change it from a convenience to something of survival. As the poet George Herbert said, prayer should be the key of the day and the lock of the night. Brothers and sisters, may it be so. And the people said, Amen.
He was a friend to sinners. He was a gentleman, beautiful, humble, master plan. His voice could pierce the darkness, quiet and angry sea. I hear him saying, follow me. I look in your eyes and I tell you these things, but somehow I know that it's hard to believe. Could you believe if I carried my own cross? If I saw that the children were fed? If for a moment I held my opinion and quietly led? Could you believe? I am meant to be a pure reflection of the truth. So above it all I pray that I will not obscure the view. Could you believe if I stood here transparent, and through me you could look in his eyes? Could you believe if you saw right inside, and there was no disguise? Could you believe if I really was like him? If I lived all the words that I said? If it was clear that I held in my heart what I know in my head? Could you believe? Could you believe? Looking at me, could you believe? Could you believe?
Thanks for joining us. Madison Avenue Baptist Church is located at 31st and Madison Avenue in New York City. Our website is www.mabcnyc.org.